Hello and welcome back to the Google Workspace Update podcast from Strawberry 7. My name is Adam.
And my name is Adam.
We're here every week to bring you the latest updates of everything happening in the world of Google Workspace. This podcast is available in audio format from your regular podcast provider and also in video format on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Strawberry7.
Coming up on the show today.
We have 11 updates for you today, so we've got a bumper show today. I've given Adam strict instructions that we need to stay on target, so let's see how that goes, hopefully as well as Luke Skywalker. So we have updates to Google Docs, Sites, Chat, Slides, Sheets, Chat, Docs, Meet, Sheets, Drive and Chat. So there's quite a few repetitions in there. I think we're going to see some exciting updates looking ahead at the document. As always, there is a link in the podcast or the video description to the document that we read from. This contains more detailed information, relevant links and lovely pictures and moving graphics that show you some of these features in action. Now, Adam has actually used a feature which was mentioned in our last podcast in this document, which is the new collapsible headings. I've had a look at the document, it looks really, really nice. So if you are used to popping onto our document and you go on there and think there's no contents because you can only see the headings as I did, then just have a little look to the left of the heading. You'll see a little arrow that you can click to expand those headings, and that will have all of the information in there that you're used to seeing. So don't panic, the information is in there. Adam's just going to give us a little bit more information on that before we get into the main part of the show, because you were doing some experimentation, weren't you, Adam, with sort of how that affects the document as to whether you're the editor or whether you're a viewer, as our listeners would be. Tell us a little bit more about that, Adam.
Yeah, so I was playing around with this a little bit earlier on in the week. So obviously all of our listeners, you have view-only access to this document. So if you're opening the document as view-only, if you expand any of the headings, then what you see only affects you. However, if you have edit permissions on the document, if you expand one of the headings, then it will expand for everybody, including those with view-only permissions. What I thought was a little bit interesting that I also noticed at the time of testing, when I was looking at it from view-only, you could expand the headings, but you could not collapse them again. Now you can, so maybe the document that I was working on just needed a bit of time to update or something along those lines. But at that moment, I couldn't collapse them. But now, I tested it just a minute ago, now from view only, you can expand and collapse them again. I also played around with this a little bit because I was querying whether you almost had to, if this only applied to a list or somewhere where you'd have bullet points in, because that's where it kind of looked a little bit based on the graphic that we were given last week, but that is not the case. You can have anything as collapsible, so it looks as if a heading appears within the outline view or the document summary, which you may see on the left-hand side of your document, anything that appears there should be collapsible.
Excellent. That is a really, really nice explanation there, Adam, and thank you for being so thorough as you always are. I'm sure listeners will find that very, very interesting. If you're listening, don't have a clue what we're talking about, then have a listen to our last podcast under the Google Docs update, I think it was, wasn't it, Adam, where they talked about this feature in part of Smart Canvas. So have a little listen to our last update to get some more information on that. But for now, let's get to it.
On with the show. Right, so obviously we have 11 updates for everybody this week, which is quite a few. So first of all, thank you very much to everybody. If you've been tuning in, if you've been listening to all of the updates, we know we've had quite a lot recently. So thank you very much for everybody that is also tuning in to listen to all of them. The saving grace for this week, the first 6 are update-lets, so we can fire through them quite quickly. And first off, we have an update-let to Google Docs. So you can now improve time management and display time with new chips in Google Docs. In addition to the recent introduction of new Smart Canvas features in Google Sheets and Google Docs, Google is adding a new timer chips that can be used to time box activities and ensure you're using your time productively. To more finely represent time, Google is adding a time of day chip to Google Docs. By typing at today, you can add the time and then select set time to add the new time to the date chip.
Wow, that's a really cool update. I really like the graphics here. The first thing I thought when I saw this timer was I thought teachers are going to love this. They're always bringing up timers to keep all the students on track and sort of remind them how much time is left in the lesson. I know they use that feature in Active Inspire, so I think this is going to be a really cool feature that people can use on their boards there, whether they're, teachers. I think maybe even I might use this to try and help keep me on track, because sometimes I don't realise how long I'm spending writing a document or doing something here. So it's just another really nice feature in this sort of smart canvas area. The only bit I didn't understand fully, Adam, was the second part where it's saying about at today, you can sort of add in today's chip and then set a time. That setting time, I don't know if there's any information in here particularly about it, but is that to start a timer at that time, or is that literally just sort of setting a date?
No, I think it's almost two mini updatelets in one. One, you can add a timer. Second, you can add a date, and your date can include a set time. So it's not like a countdown that would start at that time. So first off, in the example we have in the document, they set a timer. There's one for 5 minutes, or you can have it for 20 seconds, or whatever you like. That is one mini little updatelet. Another one is you can just add a date, whether that's today's date or a date in the future, but you can also include a time with that date. So if you're referencing an event or something, you can say, well, this is happening on this time at this date. Other way around. On this date at this time.
On this date at this time, exactly. Yeah. Okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah, because I thought I'd seen that at today feature before, but now they've kind of added the time in, which is pretty cool. Great. Okay, what's the release schedule here?
Okay, so rolling out to rapid release is right now, and launch to scheduled release is planned for May the 31st.
Great, that's going to be pretty soon, so that's lovely. Fantastic, thank you, Adam. What have we got next?
Next up, we have a Google Sites update. We don't get too many of these. You can now use alternative text for visual content on Google Sites. Google Sites editors are now able to add or edit alt text on inserted images, or add edit alt text on background images, making their sites more readable for everyone. Now, I must admit, obviously, we don't actually use Google Sites that much, so I don't have too much input on this one, but hopefully if you are using Google Sites, then this will be helpful for you.
Yeah, I understand what it's talking about there. So just for clarity, what that means is sort of when you hover over a picture, and if you stay on it for a second, it's that little text box that comes up and it can sort of say things about the picture.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That's what alternative text is referred to in sort of website world. It's quite interesting that you can add that, because I thought you could always do that in Google Sites, but obviously you couldn't, and that's
you definitely can now.
Yeah, you can now, exactly, yeah. It can be very, very useful, because I believe that there are visual impairment tools that possibly use that alt text tag to then read out what the image is, like a description maybe of the image.
That could be really helpful for anybody that is using that then.
Yeah, I don't know that for a fact. I might be wrong on that, but I believe that there are sort of facilities to do that. So it's not to do with this update, but obviously if you put the alt text on your Google Sites, then possibly those screen readers and things could use that information to sort of get some useful information to people with visual impairment. What's the sort of availability here, Adam?
Okay, so that is rolling out to rapid release right now. Launch to scheduled release is planned for May the 30th.
Oh, about the same time as the last one. That's great. Thank you, Adam. What have we got next?
Up next, we have our first Google Chat update of the week. So there's now enhancing Google's web onboarding experience in Google Chat to help users get started quicker. To build upon the recent Google Chat improvements and help organize using chat more efficiently, Google is revamping the web onboarding experience for those that are new to Google Chat. When using chat in Gmail or visiting chat chat.google.com for the first time, you will see options to start a chat, join a space, or browse apps. If you select the first option to send a direct message to a colleague or group, or simpler chat creation options will appear. Choosing to join a space will display a new browsing experience, and the chat option will show you how apps work and the ways to find and add apps.
I think this is really nice because people aren't necessarily used to Google Chat, and coming into an organisation, you might look at Google Chat, and obviously people can kind of pick it up quite quickly. It's not that it's difficult to use, but I think just giving people a little bit of guidance here is really useful. The other thing that I can see from this graphic that I really, really like, because this is something that we had a big complaint about in Google, is look at those simple links to download the chat app. And I really, really like that because they'd kind of hidden those away a bit, and that it was especially very difficult to download it on a computer. They sort of hid it within that universal download area in Google. So for anybody listening, you might have not seen this. If you are on Google Chrome and you go to, say, Google Drive, if you have a look in the address bar, you'll notice a little icon that's like a computer with a down arrow. That appears sometimes in Google areas, like areas of Workspace, for example. So you get it in Google Chat, you get it in Google Drive. What that means is that there's an actual app that you can download for that element of Google Workspace, and it might not just be Google Workspace, it applies to other things as well. But not many people know about that. I didn't know about it. We didn't know about it in the team, and we were going a bit mad, weren't we, trying to download the chat app, and we couldn't figure out how to do it. So I really like that.
Yeah, so the one thing that I will add on about that, it's when you say download the app, it's not really, you're not actually really downloading the application, or you're not installing anything onto your computer. It's more of a Chrome app that is available outside of your standard Chrome browser. However, you will actually need your Chrome browser to be open in order for it to function, because it is essentially a different window of Google Chrome, but that it is only showing chat or only showing Meet or something like that. So that's just worth bearing in mind.
Absolutely, yep. That's a very, very good point, Adam. And it's like we said before, isn't it? It's almost like a shortcut rather than an app, isn't it? But yeah. It's a very, very good point. Thank you, Adam. When is this when's this change going to be happening?
So this is rolling out to rapid release right now. Launch to scheduled release is planned for June the 5th.
Excellent. So that's a little bit further along than those other updates, but still very soon. Lovely. Thank you, Adam. What have we got next?
Next up, we have a Google Slides update. So spell check for client-side encrypted files in Google Slides. So if you're working on a client-side encrypted file in Google Slides, you'll now see spelling suggestions as you type. You can see suggestions for misspelt words by accessing the menu or clicking on the word. And clicking on the word, that works whether you're right-clicking or left-clicking.
Excellent. That's I've sort of seen that in those spell checks before. It's interesting. We've seen a few updates come through for spell check, and it's funny because spell check, you almost sort of take it for granted. You just think it's embedded now, and you don't really think much of it. But I understand the spell check now being available for these client-side encrypted files. Anybody not familiar with this, we have talked about this in previous podcasts because there have been some updates that have come through about these client-side encrypted files. And in a very sort of brief nutshell, what this means is where you have files but you're using your own encryption system as a client, hence client-side encryption. So it's Google have their own encryption system anyway, but this is where you're using your own one, maybe from a third-party tool or one you've created, I suppose, if you're super clever. Then you're using that, and now obviously spell check is going to be able to work on those files as well. So I didn't know that spell check wasn't available on those files because we don't use client-side encryption ourselves. We use Google's encryption system, but it's good to know that spell check is available on those as well. What's going to be sort of the availability and release here, Adam?
So this update is available to Google Workspace Enterprise Plus, Education Standard, and Education Plus customers only. So it's not going to be available to anybody else. And this is rolling out to rapid release right now. Launch to scheduled release is planned for May the 30th. I've also added in a link in our document that you'll find in the podcast description as well. So if you'd like to learn more about encrypted files in Google Drive, Docs, Sheets, or Slides.
Lovely. Thank you, Adam. That's really useful. And that does make sense, those tiers that it's been released on, because client-side encryption is for those slightly higher tiers, isn't it? So that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Adam. What have we got next?
Up next, we have a Google Sheets update. So it's a little bit similar to the last update. So export client-side encrypted spreadsheets to Excel files. So back on the client-side encryption, so Google Sheets files that are client-side encrypted can now be exported as an Excel file, which kind of suggests that they could not be exported as an Excel file previously. This means you'll continue to protect your files with encryption, but convert your files as needed.
Okay, yeah, I think you're quite right. Like the spell check, I guess that it wasn't available before. It makes a lot of sense, though, that and it's interesting here that they put in the graphic, which they haven't put in the update, but they've put in the graphic here, where it says download and decrypt. So I think that's the key thing here, is your client-side encryption is not, I think, going to translate across to Excel when you download it, which...
Yeah, that's a really key point, actually. The decrypt is definitely the key word within there. So something I was thinking about, but obviously we're not going off on a tangent, but something I was thinking about. So with the last update, with the spell check, in order to spell check a document, you need access to be able to view the document to then do the spell check. So I was thinking, how could Google access the document if it's encrypted? But it does kind of imply with this, what you were just saying, if you're exporting something to Excel, then you're decrypting it first to then be able to move on and do another step with it, in this case export to Excel.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also to do probably with a bit of a fundamental compatibility difference. So the client-side encryption probably works great on Google Sheets because it's all embedded within Google Workspace, but obviously when you're taking that file across to an Excel format, maybe that client-side encryption can't go with it because Excel doesn't support the certificates or doesn't support the methodology of the encryption that the system is using. So I understand that it has to be in a decrypted format. There's two things I'd say about that. One, as listeners, whether you're customers or admin, bear that in mind, that it will be decrypted.
Because you may want to encrypt it again afterwards.
Yeah, exactly, using a different system. You're quite right, Adam. Or maybe using your client-side encryption system, but an element of it that then allows encryption of Excel files, if that kind of makes sense. It's difficult to be specific because these encryption systems vary a lot. So that's number one, is be mindful that it's going to de-encrypt. Number two, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some kind of admin control for this in the future, because as an organisation, you may want to prevent your users being able to do that. You may want to prevent people being able to download those encrypted documents and de-encrypt them effectively.
Or I was going to say, or just de-encrypt them, decrypt them even at all. Obviously, they were encrypted for a reason in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. So we might see an admin control on that. Look at how good we are, not going off on a tangent, Adam. This is amazing. We're whipping through these updates. Thank you very much, Adam. What have we got next?
Next up is our final little update for the week, which is back to Google Chat again. So app sheet powered no-code apps are now available in Google Chat. So you can now create Google Chat apps without code in AppSheet to build integrations or workflows that suit the needs of your organization. So this is quite a compact little update. It's literally those couple of sentences is all we have about it. So do you have any thoughts on this one, Adam?
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, we're seeing a lot more of these no-code apps. No code apps, no code functions, no code features. Very, very interesting how the power of coding effectively is being translated across to people who don't have those coding skills. And I definitely sympathise with that, because I am 100% in one of those categories. My coding skills are absolutely zero. I'm terrible at coding. I've tried many times, cannot get my head around it. You're seeing that with artificial intelligence, aren't you? And with ChatGPT, people asking ChatGPT to code things, or asking AI to code things. So I can understand how it's moving in that way. We haven't really used AppSheet very much. It's very interesting that this is being used in Google Chat, that this is a Google Chat update, but then using AppSheet in the background. I'm just trying to look at the example that they've given here. Were you doing the same?
I was going to say, for anybody that's just curious about what are we on about, or what are we pondering about, I think the example, the graphic in the example in the document that we attached to the podcast could be a helpful way of just at least partially understanding what is actually going on, because it looks as if you're able to do something without code in AppSheet, and then that basically produces almost a command, or not a magic button as such, but a function that then does something within Google Chat. So I think the graphic that's included almost only shows you half. It's kind of showing you the creation, but not the finished product when somebody actually then runs it in Google Chat. I want to see what happens next.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking at the moving graphic here, now that I've been able to look at that a bit more, it's very interesting. It's almost like saying there's some options that you've really got to look at the moving graphic to sort of appreciate it, but there's some options here of saying things like when I depart and on this certain date, or when this happens. And I think that's what it's doing, is it's basically saying when something happens, when this action happens, when a date changes or something, send a message, or send a message out to these group chats, or maybe create a space or something like that. It's an interesting idea, and I'd be very interested to see how it ties in with other platforms as well. So it's kind of like when somebody when we close a support ticket for somebody, for example, when we mark it as solved, and then it does those other things, isn't it? It does those triggers.
Yep.
It's sort of like that within this chat area, isn't it?
Absolutely. So it's also a little bit like as if Google has pre-coded a handful of building blocks, and then it's all very if this then do that kind of situation. So you can say with some predetermined answers. So you could say, oh well, if I'm leaving the building at this time, then do that, or then send a message to somebody to tell them I'm leaving, or I'm on my way, or that's just one example. So I'm imagining it's something a little bit along those lines.
Yeah, very interesting. Like you say, so little on this update. I mean, they've really sort of they haven't even put any release dates on here, have they? Or any availability or anything. I mean, it's just...
they put the availability of who it's to. So this is available...
Oh, sorry, I missed that. Sorry,
and
Adam,
actually, it is available. It's available now to all Google Workspace customers with an AppSheet Starter, Core, or Enterprise plan. So I think that's a tier that we've not really come across too much before. So it does look like it is going to be quite specific to those users.
Do you know what? That's why I missed it, because it was a sort of a little bit of an unfamiliar format. So yeah, so you've got to have sort of an app sheet system, which makes sense. Not something that we use, but very, very interesting to see there. Lovely, thank you, Adam. What have we got next?
Right, so that's all of the little updatelets out the way, and it only nearly almost took us 25 minutes to get through. So now onto the meteor updates. So up next, Google Docs. So you can now simplify workflows in Google Docs with variable chips. So we've spoken about chips a fair bit. So earlier this year, Google shared innovations in Smart Canvas that help you simplify workflows and complete common tasks with easy to use prompts in Google Docs. Now, Google is introducing variable chips, which is a feature that makes document creation for things like invoices, contracts, or broader communications much easier. Simply predefine and insert placeholders such as a client's name, contract number, or an address, and then update it throughout an entire document by editing the value in one place. Using variables as dynamic placeholders makes template creation more straightforward forward, whether that is through custom building blocks or using the document as a template. And we spoke about custom building blocks, I think that was in last week's episode.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. The moving graphic, again, makes this sort of very easy to understand. And I think it's very cool. I mean, I suppose in a way it's almost like a mail merge, isn't it? You know, you're kind of creating this list and you're creating these areas and then you're putting these placeholders in. So it's very cool. I love the example that they've given in the graphic of making that invoice. So we hope you enjoyed your milk, bread, cheese and stuff. Thanks for your business. That is the strangest invoice I've ever seen. But yeah.
To be honest, I like doing that. Keep the example very simple, because then it makes it easier to translate into something else. If they showed something really complex, then somebody looking at it may think, well, how can I translate that to me? Yeah,
absolutely. No, you're quite right. And it's very interesting how the way this seems to work is you create your tags, like product, in this case, product 1, product 2, product 3. You could use those tags all throughout the document, but you update product 1, like one entry, and that replaces it all throughout the document. That seems to be the way that this works. So very, very cool. Taking a very powerful feature, making it very simplistic. You know, that I think that's really good. Thank you, Adam. What's the sort of getting started on this?
Okay, so for the admins, there's no admin control for this feature, but for the end users, you can visit Google's Help Center to learn more about inserting and using variable chips. It looks like I've actually forgotten to insert the link, but by the time this podcast goes live, there will be a link in there for everybody to use if they would like to a bit more information about this.
Great. Adam, you didn't need to tell them. They wouldn't have even known. What's the rollout pace and availability, please?
So, rapid release, there's a gradual rollout, so up to 15 days for feature visibility, which started on May the 23rd. Scheduled release, there's also a gradual rollout, which is starting on June the 5th.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can imagine this is a pretty complex update. We've seen this again and again, haven't we, with these more complex, like building blocks or very complex smart canvas updates where they need to do a sort of phased rollout. I guess it's so that it's not overloading Google servers or something like that. What's the availability, please?
Okay, so this is going to be available to Google Workspace Business Standard, Business Plus, Enterprise Standard, Enterprise Plus, Education Plus, and also non-profits, but it will not be available to anybody else.
Yep, that makes perfect sense for putting it on those tiers, sort of business standard up, basically. Thank you very much, Adam. What have we got next?
Up next, we have a Google Meet update. So, extending client-side encryption to chat messages in Google Meet. So, back on client-side encryption. So, if you're using client-side encryption for Google Meet, in-meeting chat will now be supported. As with the audio and video content of your client-side encrypted meetings, all in-meeting chat messages will be encrypted and inaccessible by any third parties, which includes Google. So Google already encrypts all of your data at rest and in transit between their facilities, and client-side encryption gives users direct control of their encryption keys and identity service that they choose to authenticate for those keys.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, we mentioned a little bit about client-side encryption there. That sentence sums it up much better than I did, so that hopefully will help if you're unfamiliar with client-side encryption. And this is almost sort of an update-lit, isn't it? Where we're just seeing that client-side encryption being extended to chat messages within Google Meet. And again, for anybody new who's listening, or even people who have listened before, we're back into Google Inception, as Adam likes to say. We're not talking about Google Chat here. We're talking about Google Chat within Meet, within a meeting. So when you're using the chat on the side there when you're in a Google Meet. And I think expanding client-side encryption to that makes perfect sense. It's a very good idea. You could be putting sensitive information in there, all sorts of different things you could be putting into that Meet chat. So, yep, makes perfect sense that Google are doing that. What's the getting started here? I imagine there's some information for the admins here, Adam.
Yes, that's right. So I've added a link into the document for admins if they wish to learn more about configuring client-side encryption. For the end users, you can also visit the Help Center if you would like some more information about client-side encryption for Google Meet. And once again, there's links in the document.
Great, thank you very much, Adam. Yep, those links will be really useful for people who want to get started on that. What's the sort of rollout pace here?
So rapid release, there's an extended rollout, so potentially longer than 15 days, which started on May the 24th. Scheduled release, again, there's an extended rollout, which is starting on June the 26th. So there's about a month or so difference between that, which is quite long. Usually there's not that much time between the rapid release and scheduled release, but there is for this one.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, that's probably one of the largest gaps we've ever seen between rapid and scheduled. Lovely, thank you, Adam. What's the availability on this?
So this is going to be available to Google Workspace Enterprise Plus, Education Standard, and Education Plus customers hosting client-side encrypted calls, but it will not be available to other tiers.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Again, like we said with the other client-side encryption update, it's on those slightly higher tiers. We said this before about client-side encryption, but I'll just say it again. It's very nice of Google to include this on Education Standard as well as Education Plus, because if you look at this, it's available on Workspace Enterprise Plus. Yeah, it's a really high tier. That's as high as it goes, I think, for business environments. But with education, it's not just Education Plus, the highest one, it's also Education Standard. And it's really nice to see that Google are considering education institutions who aren't necessarily on the highest tier, but they still want that client-side encryption to meet their compliance requirements there. So very nice. Thank you, Adam. What have we got next?
Up next, back to Google Sheets. Adding new capabilities to timeline view in Google Sheets. So again, I'm pretty sure we mentioned this on our podcast probably a handful of episodes ago now. So last year, Google introduced an interactive timeline view that allows you to track projects in Google Sheets. The timeline view enables you to easily interact with project information and can help you manage things like marketing campaigns, project milestones, schedules, cross-team collaboration, and more. So Google are adding some new capabilities to expand the timeline view feature, such as enhanced formatting options, including card text truncation and the undo redo option, a card collapsed view that enables you to merge cards into a single row for each card group, and also print and download support.
Oh, excellent. I really need to look into this feature. I'd completely forgotten about this in one of our previous updates. I really need to look into this feature and use this, because when we're doing Google migrations for our customers, I give them a timeline document that I do in Google Sheets, but I haven't used it in this format before. So I really need to look into getting this interactive timeline view so that it looks a little bit more interesting. So I'm definitely going to have a look into that. And thank you, Adam, for providing the link there for last year when the previous update was announced, because like me, if anybody out there has forgotten about this update and needs to look back on it, then you can click there in the document to look back on the last update. So thank you very much. I'm very interested to see those different changes.
Sure it was it last year? I'm sure it wasn't actually that long ago
last year
when it actually came out. I'm sure, apparently it was.
Yeah.
I'm sure we only covered it a handful of episodes ago, but maybe it was originally mentioned last year.
Happens as you get older, Adam. Time goes by quicker. It's a big conspiracy that's going on, I swear. Okay, what's the getting started on this, Adam?
Okay, so for the admins, there's no admin control for this feature, but for the end users, to create a timeline, you can navigate to Insert, Timeline, select a data range, then configure the attributes in the timeline settings sidebar. You can also visit Google's Help Center to learn more about the timeline view. Once again, link in the document.
Thank you, Adam. That's very useful. And what's the rollout pace here?
So, rapid release, there's a gradual rollout for this, which started on May the 24th. Scheduled release, gradual rollout, which is starting on June the 7th. So, Oh, actually, no, that's not that far away.
That's not too bad.
It's just because it says June. June sounds like it's miles away, but it's literally next week.
I know. It was Christmas last week, I swear. It's come by so fast. What's the availability here, Adam?
Okay, so for this one, I'm going to say who this is not available to. So this is not available to non-profits, frontline starter, and frontline standard customers. It is also not available to users with a personal Google account, but it will be available to everybody else.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Adam. What have we got up next, please?
Next up, we have a Google Drive update. I particularly like this one, actually. So you can now set expirations for files in shared drives using Google Drive API. So once again, last year, Google announced the ability to set expiring access when sharing files in My Drive. To expand upon this, Google is adding the option to set expiration on files that reside in shared drives using the Google Drive API. Specifically, developers will now be able to fully control file expirations via the API, and users will be able to see but not edit file expirations in the sharing dialog, which makes perfect sense that they can see when their expiration expires, but they cannot actually change it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's absolutely fantastic. I would like to see this. Maybe you're going to kind of go into this in the getting started. Two things. I'd like to see this just a little bit easier for people to access rather than having to kind of go through an API to do this. I'd like to see end users being able to do this at a user level rather than just an admin or developer level. So that when you add... So say I add you in to a file as an editor, it would be great if I could just say, I want to add Adam in as an editor until this date. I want to set an expiry until this date, and you wouldn't be able to change that because it would know that I had added it, but I could change it. I don't think that would be too hard to execute there. And the second thing, and this would be really useful for me, and I thought that's what this update was going to be when you first started reading it, but unfortunately not, is I'd really like to see that ability when you're setting files available for anybody. So when you're setting that sort of de-restriction on files and you're saying let anybody view this file or anybody edit this file, again, I'd really like to see an expiration on there, because unless I've completely missed it in the share, I don't think you can do that easily as an end user at the moment.
I completely agree. Yes, it would be lovely if it was that way. I'm not too familiar with the Google Drive APIs myself, but fundamentally, I do really like this update. I think it's great that you can specify expiration times for when you're sharing documents. I think that is a really good and very helpful and beneficial update to have available. But I do agree, it would be much easier if you could just do it directly, almost just as part of the sharing process. So, as I say, I'm not too familiar with the Google Drive API, so I'm not too sure what additional steps would be involved to do that, but it would be much easier if it is just when you're sharing a document as standard, there's almost just a drop-down share until X date.
Yeah, I completely agree, absolutely. And it's kind of like I've said before about Google Drive as well, and I wish Google would tweak this a little bit. I wish in the admin console there was an easier way. I'm sure you can do it in the reporting section if you kind of go into the logs enough or you create a custom filter enough, but I just wish there was an easy way in the admin console of saying, show me all of the files across my entire organisation, across all the shared drives, that are set to anybody with the link can edit. Show them all to me with a link so that I can click on them and see what they are, go straight to them. That would just be so useful because you know as well as I do, Adam, even with us being on top of our data sharing and how we manage our files, it's very, very easy to share a file out to somebody for that one purpose and say, oh, they haven't got a Google account, anybody with a link can view, and you send them the link, but they only need to view it that one time or for a couple of days or something. But you're busy, you just forget to change the security back. Now, that's not necessarily inherently a security risk because somebody would need to have the link, but it's better for it to not be shared when it doesn't need to be rather than be shared. And I wish Google would make it a bit easier for administrators to go in and just see which of those files are set to share with anybody, or you could customize. You could say, show me anybody with a link can view, show me anybody with a link can edit, or whatever it is.
Absolutely. Or in the admin console, set a default for your organization to say, oh, by default, this person will have access for a week. Or some reasonable time within that. So then you'd manually have to take extra steps if you wanted somebody to have longer access like that. So then if you do just forget, obviously we're all human, it's very easy to forget something like that, especially if you're working with lots of files. So then if there was a default that would say, yeah, do it for a week or something, then it doesn't really matter if you forget to do it, because after that time, then by default, it would have revoked the access anyway.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said. Yep, I think that's a fantastic idea. Thank you, Adam. What's the getting started on this?
Okay, so to get started with this, for the admins, there is no admin control for this feature, but for the developers, you can visit Google's Help Center to learn more about setting an expiration date for file access. Links in the document. It's very interesting that it says that is for how the developers would do that. So it kind of implies you need to be a developer in order to do this. So presumably the developers have access to the Google Drive APIs to enable this feature in the first place. So it's going to kind of cut down who actually can do it, which I'm a bit surprised about. You kind of would have thought it would just be a little bit more open to everybody. But to get started for the end users, this feature will be on by default and cannot be disabled. If an expiring access has been set by a developer in your domain, you will automatically see it in the sharing dialog. So that I completely agree with. If you're the end user that's viewing a document, or a document that has been shared with you, it makes full sense that you can see your level of access and when that is available until, but you cannot change that in any way. And it's handy to have a visual reminder. If it's an important document that you can say, oh, my access finishes tomorrow or something, then maybe that will be a visual reminder to have a conversation with somebody if you need to extend that level of access.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. What's the rollout pace here and availability?
So this feature is available right now, which is great. And this is going to be available to Google Business Standard, Business Plus, Enterprise Essentials, Enterprise Essentials Plus, Enterprise Standard, Enterprise Plus, Education Fundamentals, Education Standard, the Teaching and Learning Upgrade, and Education Plus customers. So it will not be available to anybody else, only those tiers. So I thought I was just repeating myself then. There's so many standards and pluses and things in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, essential standards, enterprises. Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much, Adam. I think we are on our last update, aren't we? So wow, we have done amazingly well.
Flying by, so we can just chat about this one nice and slowly. Right,
go off on a million tangents.
So finally, from us this week, we have another Google Chat update. So you can now enable your users to report inappropriate messages for review. So for select Google Workspace customers, admins can enable content reporting for their Google Chat users. Once a user has flagged a message, admins can find more information about the incident in the security investigation tool and decide whether further action is needed. This feature is available for Google Chat on the web and mobile devices. Admins can turn content reporting on for direct messages, group messages, or messages in spaces, and select which reporting categories are available for their users, such as harassment, rude behaviour, sensitive information, and more. Admins can also customize the language in the reporting dialog box to educate users about next steps following the report submission. Effective collaboration in the modern workplace requires a sense of psychological safety for users and appropriate protections for sensitive business data. Content reporting in Google Chat enables users the opportunity to report inappropriate messages for review. This can include anything from offensive, discriminatory, or explicit content, sensitive data that should not be shared, and more. This is critical for Google's customers, especially those of larger organizations and in regulated industries, to stay on top of potential abuse and inappropriate use of chat in their organizations. Further, admins can use the Security Investigation Tool Administrator to decide whether data protection rules need to be creative to proactively prevent similar messages from being shared in the future. along with recent updates, such as managing Google Chat spaces in the admin console. Google hopes this feature helps admins manage chat across their organisation.
Oh, it's a really, really nice update, and I think it's very thorough here as to the different admin controls which are there and the different options which are available for admins to be able to control this, and put this out for the users. I tell you what I found very interesting reading this update is I was immediately thinking of, I think it was in the last podcast or maybe the one before, where there was that new kind of category about abusive content, and it was more talking about Google Drive, I think, at the time.
That was the new junk box for Google Drive, where you can move any junk files, essentially, that had been shared with you into a separate junk folder within Google Drive.
Yeah, there was that, but do you remember there was also that other one about abusive content within sort of Google Docs, or maybe something like that? It was like abusive content, and we said at the time that we thought that might be related to the junk one that you've just mentioned on Google Drive. And maybe that abusive thing is going to be tied in with this, because I said at the time that I thought there was going to be some kind of analysation of what was going on in Google to determine what it thought was abusive, the same way that it flagged up that report when Gary had moved all those messages into junk mail by accident, and it said, oh my god, Gary's phishing reports have gone through the roof in your organisation, because that had happened. So it's interesting to see this, because I think this will start to flag up more in the security area if people are reporting these things of saying, oh, there's a spike in abuse going on here or something like that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this update, it's really good that to have the option to report anything, to be honest, regardless of the platform, if there's something that's not good, especially if somebody's being a little bit abusive or just not using it appropriately, then it's great to have the reporting option. I think this is definitely going to be very helpful for those larger organisations, just as Google mentioned in this update. So for us, we're quite a small team. If you send me something inappropriate, I can just be a bit frank with you and say, stop sending me something inappropriate. Whereas if you're with a large organisation, maybe you don't have direct interactions with everybody. So then using this feature could be very helpful for you. I did find it slightly amusing, though. Obviously, anything that is inappropriate or abusive is not amusing. However, in the example that Google gave us, you're able to set the reason why you feel that something is inappropriate, and somebody just mentioned that the tone of this message is rude and inappropriate. So I just thought, for every single message that I get sent, your tone seems very pointed right now. I don't want to see it.
Absolutely, yeah. I think people might need to exercise some discipline and judgment as to when.
But I also think it's great that there is customizable options from that admins can implement to kind of specify, give reasons for why they think that something it needs to be reported in the first place, and also they can add a message as well, because sometimes if you're just looking at a screenshot or a snippet of something, you can kind of look at something at face value, and it can be a bit challenging to see it in the context of the bigger picture or something along those lines. So it is really good that people can add a quick message to say, oh well, this has been happening continuously, or I've received 10 messages that are similar to this or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, it's potentially a nicer environment for people to be able to report these things, because I think even with HR, sometimes people can feel uncomfortable reporting things about their colleagues, or saying something about their colleague. And then if they don't say anything, they then think on it, and then they maybe go, oh, maybe it's me who's overreacting or reading into it, or maybe it's, especially if no one else has a problem with that colleague, this potentially creates more of an environment where they can report it, not anonymously, but they can report, because it's not anonymous, but they can report it in a way where it's more discreet, rather than having to go as far as going to HR directly or anything like that, or going to their line manager directly.
And should include evidence for whatever they're reporting as well. So they've got the receipts for whatever that they're saying. If they're claiming that somebody keeps sending them inappropriate messages or something, then as soon as they report it, then the admin or whoever picks up the notification of the report should easily be able to see what has actually happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what would be very interesting, maybe in some larger organisations, obviously not us, but some larger organisations, is, HR may find out something that's been going on for a while. I mean, can you imagine if suddenly these reports are available and suddenly you see a big spike in one user, like one person, not one person reporting, but one person being reported on, and you see a big spike, and then suddenly you start going, hang on a second, like loads of messages that this person's sending have been reported as inappropriate, and they are inappropriate, and then you go and speak to the team, it's like, oh yeah, that's what they're like, they're always doing that. So I think this could potentially uncover some of those people who are acting inappropriately in the workplace, and are sort of almost flying under the radar because there maybe aren't those other mechanisms for people to be able to report that, or they don't feel comfortable. And for anybody listening who's thinking, oh, this is a bit of a sort of Big Brother snitch sort of thing, I wouldn't say so at all. I mean, I don't know about you, Adam, but nobody has ever said that I have behaved inappropriately in the workplace or said anything inappropriate or anything like that. I think as long as you just act professionally and act like a regular person, then you've got nothing to worry about, have you? I mean, you've got to act
absolutely.
professionally.
We've mentioned before, and especially in this kind of situation, if you're using Google Chat, you're probably within a professional organisation, so you can just continue to act professionally. But using this feature, it helps you be a little bit more discreet, but it's also peace of mind as well, just to know that you have that option, so you don't have to overthink or get worried or become anxious or something like that. It's almost as a safety net, really, just to say that option is available. Hopefully it won't be needed, but it is there if it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Thank you, Adam. What's the getting started here?
Okay, so for the admins, this feature will actually be off by default, but can be enabled at the domain or OU level. You can also visit Google's Help Center to learn more about managing content, reporting in Google Chat, investigating chat messages with the security investigation tool, and also preventing data leaks from chat. That could be very helpful. For their end users, this feature must be enabled by your admin. And I've also included a couple of pictures with this. So it looks like, say, if you're on a mobile device, if you presumably you would do a long press on a message, then there should just be the option with a flag icon that you can use to report a message. And presumably it'll probably be quite similar if you're on the web as well. There's probably some dots or something next to a message that you can click on to then report that message, and then follow what you see on screen.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Adam. Yeah, because people might not be clear on how they actually report. So thank you for clarifying that, Adam. What's the rollout pace and availability here?
So rapid release and scheduled release, there's a gradual rollout, which started on May the 25th, and this is going to be available to Google Workspace Enterprise Plus, Education Standard, and Education Plus customers.
Okay, so quite high level then, right at Enterprise Plus. I would have liked to have seen Google make this a little bit more open and a bit more available to other tiers. But maybe they're thinking this is only really a problem in quite big organisations, possibly. But Enterprise Plus is quite high. It is nice to see it in Education Standard and Education Plus. But as we know, Google Chat isn't really actually used very much there, apart from within staff, staff using it. So good that it's a bit more open to education. I would have liked to have seen it on more tiers in the work sort of sphere. But maybe it will come to some more tiers in the future.
Yeah, I wonder, but maybe Google Chat is actually used a bit more within the education environment than we initially thought, and that's kind of what stemmed Google to come up with this update in the first place and to set it at those tiers.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that we're starting to use it more and more in the education arena, but definitely with staff, not with students, but definitely with staff being able to communicate around. So yeah, maybe it is being used a little bit more than we realise. But either way, very, very nice update there. A nice way to round off. So that's it. That's all that you need to know about all of the latest updates that are happening in the world of Google Workspace. Remember that this podcast is available in audio format from your regular podcast provider and also in video format on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/strawberry7. Thanks very much to Adam, and thank you for joining us this week.
And thank you, Adam, as well. We'll be back again next week with more updates.
Goodbye.
Bye.